getting ready to do this thing. Uh, Episode number 108, I think we're on. I mean,
In 3 more, we will be at 100 episodes.
you and I together.
You and I together, yeah.
That's wild. That's so many episodes.
That's so many episodes, and yet we still have
So
so
much.
much to say.
Who would have thought we could say so much? Anyone who knows us would have guessed. All right. Shall we do an intro and get started on this one?
Let's do it.
Okay.
All right.
So, I guess I'll start. Let me
Yeah.
just have the YouTube in front of me in case we are joined by any wonderful listeners who want to participate in the live chat.
All right.
Okay. Oh, and I need a drink. But I'm going to do that very quickly first because I don't want to be making a lot of noise while we're recording. Maya, if you could refrain from making too much background noise, it would make the editing process easy in the long term.
All right, then I'm going to turn off my AC.
Oh, what a nice idea. But it's more the things like typing and banging on the table when you're feeling really emphatic about what you're saying, which I
Oh,
totally
shit.
understand the impulse toward.
Oh, God, do I do that? Fuck.
Sometimes. So
God, that's so like Brezhnev of me.
we
That's
should, right? We should always get a little Brezhnev, if you know what I mean. We should tweet also to let people know we're live.
oh, that we're on. Okay, I'll do that.
This is the fun
La
part for everyone
la
to watch.
la. Yeah, they love this part.
Switchboard staff says Maya's sound is great. Rebecca's kind of quiet. Well, I over-quieted myself.
See,
Okay,
see.
I have made my sound louder. Please provide feedback, anyone, about how the levels sound now. It's hard for us to know without your feedback, to be honest. Okay. So, Maya, give me a thumbs up when you're ready to start the actual episode about contagious disease and horror movies.
Give me 1 second. I'm just trying to get the link. Just trying to get the link. All right.
Next time we'll have the tweet ready. We'll have it already composed.
Oh my God. I'm so sorry, guys. Okay. Okay. Here we go. Here we go.
Okay.
And we're live. Okay. Go.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Cohen.
And I'm Maya Garantz.
And this is The Sauce, the culture and politics podcast where we drink cocktails and ruin the stuff you love.
And today we're ruining horror movies
That do not need any help getting ruined, many of them.
That's it's
A lot of
true.
them
It's
I'm
true.
a huge
But
horror
no.
fan.
Because we're ruining the pleasure that people take in them
Yeah.
by reading them as documents of
This
ideas.
is going to be one of our most classic ruining the stuff you love episodes, I think. Like, we're just going to deconstruct and tell you what's really going on in these fun movies so
Yeah.
that you can never have fun watching them again.
That's exactly what we're doing, yeah. And you
So-
can maybe see my son in the background, but I'm kind of blowing him out with the lighting, which I think is good.
I
I'm
can
just
hear-
ignoring him.
I hear something in the background. Is that
Oh,
children's voices, or is that like it's not
God.
television? You would never let them watch television.
Oh, I do let them watch television. I do.
I know. I know you would love to be a screens parent for you. We all do it. So, do you need to take care of that quickly?
I do not. I'm ignoring them.
The-
I'm neglecting my children.
viewers-
Benign neglect. Benign neglect 2020.
That is really the motto of this year. Okay, I'm really excited to talk about the movies that we're going to be talking about.
Okay, so let's get to it. But first, we do have to check in.
Yes, let's check in. Maya, how are you doing this week? What are you drinking? What's going on over in
I don't even know how I'm doing
California
anymore.
quarantine land?
I don't know how I'm doing anymore. But I do want to share that, inspired by one of my favorite Kids in the Hall skits, Girl Drink Drunk, which is one of
Love
the,
that one.
I love that one so much. I'm getting Girl Drink Drunk tonight. I made lime coladas. I made a whole, I'm telling you, coconut and everything.
So it's pineapple, coconut, and
No, it's lime. It's lime. It's a lime colada.
coconut,
So
and
it's
rum.
and rum and simple syrup. And not only did I make enough, because you guys know once I'm recording, I can't make more.
Yeah,
So I have in here
a tub full.
next
Is that
to me.
completely full? colada. Oh my gosh. Wow. It's so scientific looking.
I know. That's one of, that's like one of my husband's little pretensions for
Yeah.
a while. He
That's a
was like
fun
into
quirk.
cooking stuff that looks like science stuff.
I
And
like
once I
it.
even got him for a gift, instead of a apron, I got him a lab coat.
Mm,
You know,
that's adorable.
it is quite cute. So that's what I'm drinking. I'm gonna get girl drink drunk tonight, guys.
I support that completely. And other than working on getting girl drink drunk, and I hope you were giving the most glaring mom eyes you could to that person making banging noises in the background. It seems to have worked. But other than that, like, how's it going? How's your quarantine?
I've been doing these plague archives on Instagram,
I do
and
know.
I've been discovering stories that are way bigger and deeper than can fit on an Instagram. And so
Believe it.
I think I might have ended up getting myself in the position where I'm going to have to do a little mini series of podcasts around some of these stories.
A mini series of podcasts. I think
A,
that's a
a
great
podcast
idea.
mini
Yeah,
series
yeah.
with some of my crazier plague archive stories.
I'm going to ask the viewers if the sound is better now
Yes, and
because I
also,
have
guys,
heard that I'm still
if would
quiet.
would you listen? Would you listen to that? But I found some really crazy stories, and I'm not going to give them away, but they are crazy, and I've just given myself this task.
That's a huge thing though. I mean, there's probably so much to wade through and sort through and find out about. Like you're talking about the history of plagues and epidemics,
Yes,
right?
yes, and specific stories like dancing manias of the Middle Ages
Oh,
and how they're connected. So Tarantism and like the dancing plagues and how they were related to the actual plagues. And then like there's some stuff. There's some
that
stuff.
sounds actually
So
really fascinating.
that's what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
this task and I have to do it. And I like, oh God,
You
more shit to
know,
do. I don't need that
you
right now. But
must inform the people. You must inform and entertain the people. You can't know these things alone, Maya.
I know. I know. Oh, all right.
So,
So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. What about you? How are you drinking? What are you doing?
how am I drinking? I'm having a little miniature Paloma here, Mezcal Paloma. Yeah,
Ooh,
I mean,
very
it's
nice.
just Mezcal and grapefruit soda from the Soda Stream flavors, and
Mm,
I'm
mm.
enjoying it. We got like a brand new bottle of Mezcal, and
Woo-hoo.
yeah, I've been
Woo-hoo.
doing a lot of cocktail research recently, so
Mm.
not using that newfound knowledge right now, but I'm kind of excited about all the new cocktails that I'm going to be making in the coming weeks and months. So that's cool. And
You're gonna have to share that on our Discord channel.
yes,
And
I need
I
to.
was gonna make a cochino, but what I learned from this is that you need coconut cream, not coconut milk. So this
Oh,
isn't as appropriate of a colada as it could be. I should have coconut cream,
what is
but
coconut
this is
cream?
I have never used it, but it's the thing. It's the thing you
Okay, it's the
use
thing
for
you need.
cocktails like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes that can be challenging because we have coconut water in the fridge and we'll be making a recipe that calls for coconut milk. And my husband will be like, don't we have that? And I'm like, no, we have coconut water. And he's like, can't you just use that? And the truth is, a lot of the time you can if you have some flexibility about what ultimately is going to turn out to be
If
like.
you have some flexibility about your standards of a good
Exactly.
cocktail.
Well, this isn't for cocktails, it's more for actual food recipes because
Oh, okay, okay.
I don't take
Oh,
liberties with cocktail recipes unless it's a very deliberate choice. Anyway,
All right, guys, we want you to know we have been getting your amazing listener feedback with your amazing ideas.
hmm.
Especially, I want to express my thanks to Vagabond X at Gats to the Max because you have ideas all the time for us, and especially, I think you want us to express in one of the episodes the amount of rage that we all actually have, and I completely feel that. But we're trying to the number of just unconscionable things that are happening every day in our government it's so much so fast
Mm,
that it's really
it's
hard to
too
slow it
much.
down
Yeah.
into an episode. I'm serious. I'm serious.
Yeah.
This is actual, as we're sitting here like trying to come up with things to talk about. Like it's so much all the time, so fucking fast. It's really hard for it to coalesce into anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, oof.
It's true. And so we are trying to keep up, but it's like you have to find a balance. Sometimes we really want to talk about something, but by the time we get a chance to, it's already gone, and there's a whole new issue in the
Garbage
zeitgeist.
dumpster
Yeah,
fires, like it's so radically constant. It's really fucking hard. I yeah.
maybe if
Mm.
I put the mic closer, that will be better.
Um,
Okay. Yeah. So
but then
go.
but we are following you. We agree, and I love the idea about masks and masculinity. I super want to get to that.
That's a great
Um,
topic.
oh, it's so good. And then I also want to say that, hey guys, we our patrons, we have so many amazing bonus episodes coming up for you.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, Maya. Did you post the Kobe Bryant one?
No, did you post the Tom Waits
No,
one?
I haven't done that one yet. And I didn't mean that as a passive aggressive. I was actually not sure if you had.
No, I
Uh,
haven't yet. I haven't yet, and I really want to because I want us to talk about the MJ documentary. I want to talk about The Last Dance.
yeah.
And so many of those things are related to the Kobe stuff. So I think we have a big basketball replacing the fact that there are no NBA finals this
Mm.
year episode
But
coming up right
I think
quick.
also on the heels of our discussion last week, that will be probably posted this week about Tara Reid and the whole Joe Biden accusation thing, that sort of topic is in the news and on our minds again. So maybe the Kobe one would be appropriate. But the Tom Waits one is almost ready. I'll get that one up there too. We had a great
And
conversation like a year ago about Tom
but
Waits.
it's so good.
But we'll post it. It'll be good.
But also the another amazing idea that came from a listener who we actually had a great conversation with to add to Tiger King. He suggested that we do something about like the weird daddy daughter thing in our culture, and that also relates to the whole girl dad thing that happened out of the Kobe thing. So like
Yeah,
we have many juicy, exciting episodes coming,
for
uh,
real.
and so we're so excited to share them with you.
Yes.
Patreon.com/sauce podcast.
All right. Okay, are we ready to move on to our main topic?
Yes. Yes.
So, we've been watching a bunch of horror movies.
Oh God.
This is part of our deeper dive into the whole topic of contagious disease, pandemics, epidemics in film and in pop culture, but we've only been watching films. To look at like how disease figures in the popular imagination and what it means to us. And one thing that I observed in my research to try to find movies to talk about is that the huge majority of movies about disease seem to be horror movies.
Oh yeah.
Like there are, there definitely are medical thrillers and dramas. Then there's like sort of post-apocalyptic movies that aren't horror per se, but the majority are
That's it.
some
By the way,
form of
that's
horror.
that's the next
That will
episode.
be the next
The
one. Yeah.
whole yeah.
So before you chime in and say, why didn't you talk about this or that horror movie? If it's a post apocalypse, we probably will be talking about it next week because we had to divide it up. So some of the movies we watched, just to get you all prepared, one was, here's where I'm going to do some visuals. Shivers. Oh, it's covering Maya's face. The movie
Okay.
Shivers from 1975, is it? This is a
Yes.
Cronenberg movie, one of his early ones, very low budge,
Mhm.
very
I
fun.
also watched Rabid, by the way.
Oh, did you? Okay,
Yes,
so
I
you can
did.
tell us about that. I didn't put the poster, download the poster, so I can't show
It's
them
okay.
that.
It's okay.
No, they're all good. Everyone's going to be so disappointed they don't get to see the poster. We watched 28 Days Later, which Maya watched for the first time, and I have already seen, but Maya, you can refresh my memory because it hasn't been so recent and I've seen it. I watched Viral from 2016, which was a trip. And Maya also watched The Crazies, which is a very early Romero movie, yeah?
Yeah, 1973, and it's part of this whole suite of films that he did. I mean, you asked on Twitter, what's the earliest movie where zombieism is really connected to infection?
Mm-hmm.
And so many people came back with Night of the Living Dead as like the zombie movie, but
But zombieism is not associated with infection, even metaphorically, in that movie. You don't become a zombie by getting bitten by a zombie. In all of the Romero Dead movies, you become a zombie just by being dead. The zombieism is either caused by something, I think in the first one, it's radiation from a satellite or something, and then in the future ones,
right.
it's just not even explained. But it's,
But
yeah, it's not an infectious type of arrangement.
but the crazies is sort of part of this larger theme. And by the way, if anybody wants to like fund this, apparently the University of Pittsburgh got Romero's entire archive
Ooh,
in 2017 after he passed away. And it's like there to be studied. So he clearly was very interested in a lot of these ideas, but the crazies is his most sort of his first real, like, it's a pandemic movie.
okay. I wish I'd seen it, but I will eventually watch it because I'm curious. As an early Romero, and I'm interested in his oeuvre, but also what? But also in the context of looking at the earlier pandemic movies and disease movies, there we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but the topic has become much more popular in more recent years, I
Yes.
think, from what I can
Yes.
tell. All right, but we're going to jump in with talking about, I think we should start by talking about the Cronenberg movie Shivers.
Especially since the Cronenberg movie is where we get to the introduction of the body horror movie.
Yes.
Like that is what it is about. It is the body as a site of horror.
Yes. This movie came out in 75. It takes place in like a building, some kind of luxury apartment building.
A luxury apartment building outside of Montreal. It's on a little island, and it's the whole movie opens with this packaged living. It's like the
Yep.
beginning of lifestyle
Yes.
sort of living, where it's
Right.
like, come live this lifestyle on this island outside of Montreal. You're isolated, but we have a gym and sexy people live here, and there's a supermarket here, and there's a doctor's office. You don't have to go anywhere. Live this
Right.
luxury life.
Everything's contained, which
Mm-hmm.
becomes very relevant in a few different ways. So, you had already seen this one. I watched it for the first time. I have to say, the thing that immediately leapt out to me from the earliest scenes in the film is the rape imagery. Like, some of the first scenes are of the. Wait, that wasn't the one I wanted. The first one, yeah, is this older man chasing around this girl in like a sort of a schoolgirl outfit
Mm-hmm.
in a very implicitly rapey way, and he goes on to perform some sort of surgery on her where he strips her down almost naked, cuts her open, and then he kills himself.
Pours acid
Pours
in her. I
acid
mean,
in her abdomen and then kills himself.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just really horrifying, and there's this wonderful shot. I mean, it's all relative when you say wonderful, but there's this shot at a few scenes later where one of the other men who lives in the building comes to see her, and the shot is like from between her, the dead girl's legs. And the image I'm showing now doesn't show it. It doesn't get the entire shot, but there's blood sort of running down her leg, appearing to sort of come from her her crotch. It just gives this whole impression of sexual violation. So
Yeah.
right off the bat, you're like, okay, it's Cronenberg. Here we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, well, okay, so the plot revolves around a contagious parasite.
Yes. And you see the parasites. I mean,
Yes.
that's the thing, is that it wouldn't be, and this is something that I want to talk about which I think is ongoing and why I think infectious disease shows up in horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
It's because horror movies are making these things visible. Like, so we
Yes.
can't see COVID-19,
Right.
but like you can see this sort of slithering parasite that's kind of, and like you can see that clearly Cronenberg didn't have much of a budget, so he's like, what can look really gross but that we can afford. And his movies, as he gets bigger and bigger budgets, and then you get to like Dead Ringers, like they get more, he gets better
Sure.
makeup
Right.
artists and all that stuff. So in some ways it's delightful for this and for Rabid to kind of see him at his purest.
And his most raw, yeah. And I actually was somewhat impressed with some of the effects, some of the horror effects, given that it was low budget production. Yes, the parasite itself is pretty silly. Uh,
It's kind of penis like. There's the
well,
part where it like
that's the whole thing. So there's definitely a scene. Here we go. The
it's the
bathtub
bathtub
scene.
scene.
This woman is taking a bath, and the parasite comes up from her drain right up between her legs. And again, here we are with the sex and rape imagery. She's she's attacked by the parasite. It is not explicitly depicted. It is not, you're not told where exactly it went. But, you know, you can put two and two together, and she screams in sort of horror and uh, suggestive manner, if you like, and gets infected. This is also the same character who I think earlier, before she takes the bath, I have an image of that too, is sitting alone in her apartment drinking wine with her legs spread out as
Oh
she's
well,
shot through the door frame.
she's a lesbian. She's trying to seduce the wife of one of the main disease carriers, and it comes to be
Hmm.
that whatever this parasite does, part of what the parasite was developed by scientists. This is another thing we have to talk about. This whole like, you know, epidemic, pandemic, the Black Death. No scientists were making that. This shit is just part of like natural life. What
Yeah,
is this
it's
preoccupation with the man-made nature of
well,
it?
I mean, if we're really going to get into it, it's not necessarily natural life. It's a consequence of civilization and domestication of animals. Really, most of the
Right,
diseases that we have aren't natural in that sense, and that they come from man's manipulation of nature, but they're not
right,
made in a lab. They are
right,
nature's sort
right.
of reaction to the manipulations we have done to it, for sure.
And so it seems to be like with Cronenberg, this movie is very much, it's sort of like a herpes movie. I feel like it's a
Oh, yeah,
very response to 1970s swinger lifestyle. It's very much a like,
absolutely.
this is STDs. We're going to make STDs visible. And so the parasite makes you horny, you attack people, you rape people, you have sex. That's how it transmits the parasite. Having more sex makes the parasite breed within you. Like it's a very much like the parasite is an STD. Like
Oh,
that's what it is.
yeah. Oh, time is supposed to be up for this, but I'm going to give us 5 more minutes on this topic just because, like,
It sets
this,
up the other stuff.
it
It does
does
set
set
up
up
the
the
other
other
stuff.
stuff. It's actually, this is important. This is really important stuff, you guys. We have to get to it. So, the thing is about the STD thing, like, the movie is not subtle about that. The guy who invented the parasite was deliberately trying to create a mind control parasite that would make people horny because he was a sex
Yes.
perv. But there's
He
this,
was a sex perv and he wants people to return to their
right.
natural
He wants
state.
the world to become just a constant ongoing orgy.
Yes.
So the parasite makes you horny, out of control horny. And presumably so it can reproduce, it can pass on to other people. And I found this fascinating, and I keep trying to not do this in these movies, but I can't help it. Um, one of my friends is a parasitologist, and she gave a,
Why is she not
I know
on?
we should have her on. I
Oh,
should ask her to actually, because it would be wonderful. I kind of don't want to subject her to these movies, but also it would be great to hear her thoughts. But she did a nerd night talk for us about mind control parasites. That is a real thing, absolutely.
Toxoplasmosis in
Yes,
cats is, yeah.
toxoplasmosis causes rats and mice to act fearless around cats because it needs the cats to eat the mice so that the uh,
So that the
toxoplasmosis can
toxo can
reproduce. It
reproduce,
only
yeah.
reproduces inside a cat. Kelly Wienersmith is the friend I'm referring to. She was studying at the time fish that get a parasite in their brain that creates this behavior where they flip over so that their shiny underbelly shows and reflects off the sun, so they get eaten by birds because the parasite needs to be inside the bird to reproduce. And yeah, so the
Whoa.
idea of being like parasitic zombies, this is like totally nature based and real. But in this movie, the one of the initial carriers, not the patient zero, because I guess that's the girl who gets killed, but
Yes.
one of the many men she fucked and gave it to, starts coughing up parasites that are crawling around the building, going up the drain and getting the lesbian. There's a scene in
It attacks the cleaning lady in the laundry
the
room.
woman in the laundry room. I have that one. Where do I have it? Oh, it's under. Here we go. The lady in the laundry room. I couldn't get a non watermarked image of it, but she's just a lady in the laundry room, and it attaches to her face, and then she falls on the ground, and there's this great shot of just like her feet. Again, it's like really rapey imagery. But the point being, it absolutely does not need to be sexually transmitted. And then she turns all horny, as shown by her wearing excessive makeup and no regard to
Right.
her apparent
Right.
lack of appeal and things like that. But also, you can get the parasite via kiss, mouth to mouth, as is shown when the wife of the guy who was infected kisses the lesbian who's now infected because she got raped in the bathtub by the parasite. And you see it come up the one woman's throat and go down the other woman's throat in a giant lump. Which is very, very body horror stuff. There's a lot of under the skin, undulating, moving lumps. And you also see the parasite actively coming out of the mouth of the protagonist hero's girlfriend as he realizes she's infected. So uh, it, it's interesting because the or the parasite doesn't have to make you horny necessarily. But
No, but that's what Cronenberg wants to show. Like the whole building turns into this kind of bloody orgy, like as it sort of escalates, and all of a sudden you have these rooms full of people fucking. And that's part of the thrill, and that's the thrill of body horror. Like the horror is the thrill, and then there's the sex thrill. And Rabbit, I have to say, so Rabbit is Marilyn Chambers, like the porn star from Behind the Green Door. She somehow has a weird skin grafting in an operation, and it turns into this weird penis under her armpit thing, and she stabs people with it by like seducing them. She stabs them, and so it's like she's raping them, and it's like it's you're like, oh Davey, like.
It's okay. I want to talk about body horror here because we're looking at the various ways that disease scares people, that contagion scares people. And in body horror, it's a very direct, this is going to do grotesque things to my body. It's going to make my body foreign to me. And in Cronenberg, you keep seeing, that's our timer again, which is too bad. But I'm going to finish this thought before we stop. In Cronenberg, you keep seeing this theme of bodily invasion. That's what the rape thing is, and there's like so much rape going on.
It's super rapey, guys.
The parasite gets inside your body. It invades your most personal space. And so that is the overriding theme. But there's also this really conservative thread of sexual freedom being bad news. That too much horniness makes you rape. Like that's the parasite makes you horny, and then you just have to go fuck somebody no matter what they want because you're driven by this thing. But also, as you get towards the climax, there's this like escalating series of taboos that the people in the building who are infected are shattering. And I think it's really fascinating the way that, so it culminates in, like, spoiler alert, but this is not ruining the movie for you. But it culminates in the hero, barging into an apartment where there's an older man and a younger woman, and he says, "This is come meet my daughter," and then they start touching and kissing each other. So it's like the ultimate taboo, the taboo, incest.
Oh, he also walks in on like two men
Well,
together,
that's
and
the
you're
thing.
like,
As he's getting to that scene, it's what I would interpret as an escalating series of taboos. And it's really interesting to see here. I do have some images for this. It's really interesting to see the various escalations. So, first of all, this is a great image where this infected person gets on the elevator that a woman and her daughter are in, and he's eating a cherry pie that's just clutched in his fist. So it's conveying obvious symbolism with the cherry pie, but also blood and all of that, and virginity and sex. And then when the elevator arrives, the mom is lying on the floor looking raped and murdered, and the little girl is now eating the cherry pie. So the little girl then goes on to kiss a man that they attack. So you have pedophilia right there. We're just like,
yes,
that's like
yes,
the
yes.
first taboo. After rape is pedophilia. And then as he's going through the building and everyone are just these crazed sex monsters, there's some pedo kink. There's like little kids that are on dog leashes. And then there's a couple of gay men.
Oh,
Yeah,
mm,
and the gay
uh,
men follow him into an apartment, and they're banging on the door outside, and they're saying, "Come on, why don't you want to come outside? We're having a party." And I was like, they kind of do act like that. I'm kidding. No, but it's like this is the sort of ranking, and I don't remember where the lesbian scene where the two women kiss fits in there, but it's sort
oh, I
of
think
like
that's a little
it
earlier.
is
I think that's a
earlier.
little earlier.
But
Yeah.
I believe it, if I recall correctly, it's like rape, pedophilia, um, lesbianism, pedo kink, gay men, incest.
Oh my God. But there's something about that, like, I want to move on to this, but I feel like where we're seeing is the invasion of the body, the
Mhm.
making visible of these grotesque things happening to the body, and
Yes.
this direct response to something happening in the world, these new freedoms
Oh,
that
yes.
are going to
Sexual
be
liberation.
responsible, sexual liberation as leading to horror and
Exactly.
leading to this very zombie like, body snatcher like,
Right.
mind control like.
And that's the last thing we need to say about Shivers right now, which is that it does contain a lot of elements that you see in the disease horror movies that follow. Particularly, there is that mind control element, very popular,
Yeah.
the sort of body snatcher thing. And then, of course, there's the sort of zombie imagery, where by the time most of the building are infected, they're behaving much like zombies, like you would expect to see in a zombie movie, just sort of mindlessly chasing anyone who's not
Mindless
infected, and
sex zombies.
sex zombies. Like most most zombie movies, they're like brains, and these ones are like ass.
Yes, yeah. But I would also add this is something that like so many of these movies traffic in where it's not even a horror movie if it doesn't end like this with an epidemic movie is that whatever the container is,
Hmm.
the final moment of the movie has to be and it got out and
Oh,
it's traveling to the larger
exactly,
city. That
exactly.
is huge. That is huge. Like it is not one of those movies unless it ends with whatever trouble this is, it got out.
Yeah. Okay, so on that note, talking about mind control and zombie movies, I would like to jump into the next movie that we decided to look at as representative of a certain sort of subgenre, which is 28 Days Later.
Now, 28 days later, I don't know if this should maybe go in the apocalypse category because it's a pretty end of days situation. It's like, I mean, it is the apocalypse. It's like the entire first 10 minutes of the movie or this guy like, wandering
Don't need to
through
do that. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
um,
Start again.
or this the entire first 15 minutes of the movie is this guy wandering through London that is like
Yes.
spooky, eerie, empty. Like
Correct.
it is kind of an apocalypse movie.
Uh, it is and it isn't. Um, which, you guys, if you haven't seen 28 Days Later, watch it. I think it's quite good, but
It's Danny Boyle.
yeah,
I
it's a
mean,
Danny Boyle movie.
it's
It's
really, really well done.
very good. It's tense and entertaining and smart. But we're going to share some spoilers that are like spoily. So if you haven't seen it, maybe
You can
go.
tell we feel less bad about spoiling early Cronenberg because we're like, oh
I mean,
yeah,
it's from
that's just a
1975.
B movie. It's fine. It's fine.
Right. But this one, like, I don't want to spoil it for you. If you really haven't seen it and don't want to be spoiled and you're watching us live, go make yourself a cocktail, put us on mute for a few minutes. And if you're listening to the podcast, maybe go watch it and then come back or fast forward this part and
Yeah.
listen to it later.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does at first appear to be an apocalypse movie. I want to get that image because I have some. I have this, Maya. I've got this one. London. There we go. Empty London. It's really very eerie what they did.
Oh,
Made it seem like he really was the only person left in London. Very well done and cool, and very
all I
creepy.
could think about was like how much those shots cost to
Right?
make.
Right?
Oh,
Very nicely done. And, when he starts to discover where the people are, they're all rage infected zombies, we learn.
now rage is a disease that's created in a lab. As so many of these things, I think in every movie that we're
all
talking about,
created- I swear
they are all
all.
created in a lab. Like it's really, really important. And it's just like, how does it get out of the lab? That's like the thing. But they're all created in a lab.
But inevitably, it's going to get out of the lab. Like, of course it is. Didn't anybody read The Stand? That's the whole plot of The Stand. And that came out in like the 70s or yeah, I think the 70s. Anywho, so tell me some of your impressions having just watched 28 Days Later for the first time.
Well, I mean, I think the really powerful part is him walking through that dead city.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are things about it that you see and that I saw in other movies that were all earlier movies. Like there's the moment where the few living people sort of go on this road trip with each other. And I think that what these movies share is it's a response to how there are two things. It's like, I feel like all of these movies are a response to how the world is and some kind of fable of human nature.
That's
and I
very
feel like
interesting.
that's what's so, and again, we have this military thing, which we were talking about last week. In all of these movies, you have this real conversation between authority and humans. You have like the military is always some kind of a presence. The scientists and science and the people who know are some kind of a presence. And I'm still trying to like pick apart the anxiety around those things.
That's really important and something that is a through line in almost all the horror movies we've watched. In fact, almost all the disease movies we've watched. But
all the disease movies we've watched.
very commonly
100%.
in the horror movies. Well, there's no military in Shivers that I recall.
Okay.
But
There's just the scientist, just the evil scientist.
Yeah, there's the bad scientist, which I would consider a separate issue. But
It is.
the military and sort of just generally like disruptions to our social institutions and our government
Yes.
institutions is such a big
Yes.
important theme, and you
Huge.
obviously see that very much in 28 Days Later. What I find interesting about 28 Days Later is that I think it was one of the first movies, it might have been the first, to call zombieism, and I know they're not actually like zombies in the classic sense, but
Oh my God, they are so
they're
zombies. Come on.
but to call it an actual virus.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I know that they did that in the video game Resident Evil, which came out in the mid to late 90s, I think 96. And then Resident Evil was also made into a game in 2002, which is the same year 28 Days Later came out. So they're
Right.
both sort of on that cutting edge of going from the symbolism of zombies being infected and passing on an infection to literally explicitly calling it that.
Yes.
And I think that felt very innovative at the time. Now it's almost taken for granted because so many other movies and TV shows and
That was
comic
what
books
was
have
so
gone with that.
amazing about all the people's response to you about like, oh, Night of the Living Dead, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, no, actually, like they're already inscribing it backwards on all the
Yes.
zombie movies that
Yes.
came before it. And 28 Days Later really restarted the zombie
Yeah.
sort of
That
fascination.
that
The like
genre. Yeah.
the genre really got jump started by that because it's also what's interesting about 28 Days Later versus Shivers or The Crazies is that it has the sheen of being like a legitimate movie.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? It
Oh
doesn't,
yeah,
it's not
no.
like some shitty low budge, like horror thrills and chills. It's like, it's really trying to say something. And
Yeah.
it has a huge budget and these amazing actors. Like,
Really
that's sort of,
great cast.
yeah,
And that's yeah, I think that also the sort of post-apocalyptic scenario that comes often with zombies was just really talking to people. It was really speaking to people in the early or throughout the aughts. Zombies were really popular. As I was gathering my thoughts about this, it occurred to me all of the movies and books and things that came out in the early aughts, like the books World War Z and Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, and the movies Shaun of the Dead and Zombieland, and of course Resident Evil and 28 Days Later. And it's just like there was this really big resurgence in zombie interest at that time, which is kind of interesting to me. And I had always thought that zombieism as a communicable condition
yeah,
might be about AIDS. Because that idea that you become a zombie by getting bitten by a zombie seems to have arisen sometime in the early 80s, though I do not know
wow.
who was the first to do it. And it just seems to coincide. So I always thought of it that way, and that it was always implicitly about, well, not always, but since the 80s, it has implicitly been about infection.
Yes.
And then
Huh.
it became really about infection in this century.
Yeah, and in 28 Days Later. And yet the zombies are almost like it's like it's like they're a red herring to talk about other things.
Always. Always. But there is, I think there's really some things about our fears around pandemics in there. Um, in Shivers, you have a parasite that's sort of a body snatcher in the sense that it changes your behavior. You become someone else. But in the zombie genre, you kind of cease to be. Your body isn't.
To
You're
be,
just. It's
yes.
just a vehicle. It's
Yes.
not even that
Yes.
that your mind is altered. It's that it's
No,
gone.
you are not you anymore. Yeah,
You're
you are
you're
a zombie.
you're completely altered. And I think that there is a couple things there. Like one being that loss of personhood, the loss of your individual identity. And I think that you see that in a lot of disease movies. The fear, not just of the disease, like in the sense of body horror, where it's the fear of what it will literally do to your flesh, but instead, this more social fear, this that it will make you not have personhood anymore, that you will become as one of the infected, a non-person, a someone who doesn't count. And we'll see that again in some other movies that we're going to talk about. But I think also with the zombie ones, there's this element of the fear, the thing you fear. Okay, yes, the zombie, the monstrous person represents the virus, right? We're all afraid of getting infected, but we can't see COVID-19. So
Right.
the so we
Right.
but we can see the zombie chasing us.
With the red eyes and the like,
Yeah.
ah.
But
It's very, you know what it is? It's very a thriller.
mhm,
I think Thriller was very like the sort of Living Dead in terms of like,
yeah, yeah.
stab in this. Yeah.
But also, um, it there is a way in which it makes it so that the infection isn't the fear, it's the infected that you're afraid of, which I think gets to something very deep. That it's the infected, the people who are tainted, who are damaged, they are the people around you. That's the other thing in these movies that's key, is that the people who you trust and rely upon at any moment could turn around and be rage infected and kill you. And so I think that's really interesting. It shifts the focus, I think, from fear of infection to fear of the infected. And it also
Yes.
is a lot about fearing the people around you because you don't know who could be next and who could be carrying it
Yes.
and all that.
Yes. Yes. And the fear of you getting it is really about a fear of dying. Like,
Yeah.
it's because you're not you anymore, but the
Right.
fear of the other people around you. And that's why at this peak moment in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
uh, one of our heroes, her father gets infected.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the worst possible thing.
Oh,
The
is
person
that Frank in the movie? Or is
Yeah,
that
Brendan
Oh,
Gleeson,
because I have a gif of that. Yes,
where it's
Brendan
like
Gleeson,
he gets rage and he
but
knows he's been infected, and
he
it's like
gets
that's
the rage from a drop of blood in his
in his
eye,
eye.
which is
Yeah,
really interesting because I think that was the first time I had ever seen a zombie like movie where someone got infected through like blood, fluid to fluid
totally,
contact, as opposed
totally,
to actually having
totally.
contact with the zombie.
Right,
So
right.
that
Oh,
really sort of drives home the idea of infection and infectiousness and communicability and the way that things around you are tainted. But
yes,
and because he's this trusted great character, and it's anybody around you, no matter how great they are, at the drop of a hat or the drop of a drop of blood, could become dangerous to you.
yeah. But then what's also interesting, and you wrote this and it's true, is like what's weird is that then the next set piece, they've traveled to find safety with the military.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that this sort of group of military have broken off,
Mm-hmm.
and they're creating like a rape village.
Yes, they're
And the zombie ends up being deployed to destroy them and kill them.
yes.
So the rape village is worse than the zombies. And as they get closer to nature, they get further away from zombies. So again, we also have this thing of infection. This was something that you brought up with one of my Plague Archive things, infection and the city.
Yes.
Like the city
It
is
being a
really important because we're all so close to each other. We're
yeah,
all packed in there. There's all these people. And in 28 days later, the closer they get to the countryside, the
right.
safer they get.
Exactly. And that's a long time association, urban space and disease. And there's a lot to unpack there. But I also think ultimately what the movie is saying is that the real danger never was the disease or the zombies it created. The real danger was militarism, maybe masculinity,
Yeah.
and our old friend rape. It's always got to go back to that
There's
somehow.
rape in all of these
I
movies.
mean,
Like it is rape. And a part of me is like, is this just like rape as a plot device because people are so
lazy.
fucking lazy? Like it's, yeah,
Yes, but also it's because it's about bodily integrity being violated. It's, I would say, overall, these movies, if they're about one thing, it's violation. And that could be bodily violation in body horror. It could be violation of your rights when you're
and
being
you're
quarantined. Yeah, your
look,
autonomy, your
can I
freedom. What?
just jump in with a question?
Yes.
With rape as such a potent metaphor,
Mm-hmm.
why do men have such a hard time being sympathetic to actual rape And is it because in order for the device to work, they have to believe it's rare? Do you know what I mean? Like it's a rare occurrence in the lives of people because you feel like the worst thing that they save it so they can be like, oh yeah, the interruption of your bodily autonomy. These women have their personhood taken away. They're just turned into uteruses. Isn't that horrible? And you're like, bitch, that's every day. So like
Right?
it's so weird that it could be such an effective plot device and yet not effective at all in
Because
terms of
I'll tell you what I think that maybe some people who are, men or were raised as men can share their thoughts on this. But I suspect that men are raised to be told that is wrong. That is what you don't do. So they're looking at it as that's a wrong thing to do, not that's a wrong thing to have done to you. So the reason that it is a violation even is not as much like when we watch it. I think we see it as a violation in the deepest, most profound sense of your own humanity and individuality and autonomy. But it's also a violation of taboos and a violation of just right and wrong. So maybe people are able to see it that way. But also, I think you're very correct in that it is depicted as an extraordinarily bad thing, which also is an extraordinarily rare thing. When a character does this, it means that person is evil. Therefore,
so
when your
bad.
colleague says that your other colleague did it, that can't be true because
No,
he's
because
just a
he's such a
regular
good
guy.
he's just a good guy, right? But it's also interesting because that's the part of the films where they're turning it into a thrill. And
Yes,
taboo breaking is always a thrill.
correct.
And I feel like that's what horror is about. It's about the thrills of the sort of taboo terror happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like what's interesting about 28 Days Later is that it has this more kind of like thoughtful fable. And then it has the rage zombies who are just fucking zombies. I'm sorry. They are like as traditional of zombies like as you can
Well,
ever get.
they run fast, which at the time was not done ever in zombie movies. So it was
Okay.
completely innovative. But yeah, they are zombies in every other respect. What I think is interesting, I really liked
Mhm.
your point about the closer they get to nature, the safer they become, and the sort of like getting away from the urbanism of London and into the countryside. And the zombie thing just kind of takes its course. In effect, like the herd immunity happens because
Totally.
everyone's dead.
Totally.
So they're,
All the zombies
yeah.
starve to death.
Hmm.
And the
So the
fewer
infection has
people.
nowhere to go.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
But the twist, here's the real big spoiler. The twist at the end, of course, is that it's not post-apocalyptic. That, he sees the airplane above with its contrail and realizes that in fact it's only England or Britain
Right.
that's been
Right.
affected. And so you think you're watching a post apocalyptic movie, but you're actually watching Quarantine, the movie where the diseased people are quarantined forcibly into one building. And that's what it's
Yes.
about. Like, ultimately, it's that. It's the, they have been written off by the established authorities, by people in power, as
Right.
unsalvageable, as non-counting people.
Right. Right. But they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it does sort of play its course, and that's the one movie of all of them where it doesn't end with and then it traveled across the water. Like
Right, right.
it's the one movie that ends with like, oh, this could end. This
Yeah,
horrible thing could like play itself out and be done, as
yeah,
opposed to this is going to just keep going on and spread and not stop. I feel like that's one of the images you see in a lot of these
yeah,
movies is like the map where all of a
yeah.
sudden it's like little dots and all of a
Right.
sudden it's lots of red dots and then another.
So it doesn't end with that. But I remember after watching it, I couldn't get it out of my head for days. because I found the ending so disturbing. And it's not disturbing to me the idea of, oh, it's going to get out and you can't contain it, which is probably the major theme of these movies is like, you can never contain it.
Right.
But rather, it was that like, that whole time they thought they were alone and this was the end of the world and they had nothing and no one. And it wasn't true. The rest of the world was going on without them and they were being written off and ignored and left for
And
dead.
and have people starting rape villages. But I
Yeah.
feel like that's part of what's happening is that these movies are sort of like, what happens to humans in
Yeah.
an emergency? Like,
Absolutely.
what do they do? What will you do when the shit goes down?
And that is
Will
the
you start raiding people's houses? Like, what will you do? Will you purposely infect other people? Like, you horrible fucking human. It's like Hobbes versus Rousseau. Like
sure, the
you,
nature of
man is
man.
just the nature of
Exactly.
man.
But I think that that takes us really nicely into our next topic, which is really movies that are about quarantine effectively and the disruption of institutions caused by a disease.
Right. So we have to talk about the crazies. So this is George Romero, who of course did Night of the Living Dead, this very famous horror movie, and a lot of these movies that he did in this era, including Night of the Living Dead, they're about zombies, they're about outbreak and infection, and like they're about a lot of these things. And when you watch the crazies, because we were just talking about the movie Outbreak, the
Mm-hmm.
crazies is essentially you're like, oh, this is where Outbreak got their script.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small town. It's a government developed the virus and it ended up in the water supply. And so a lot of the movie is like the sort of men in charge talking about like, should we drop a nuclear bomb on the town?
Mm.
It's like about the tension between the townspeople who are all sort of rural and farmers fighting against this invasion of military. So it's almost like, yeah, they have an infection and they're all infected and they're going to die. But also they've been infected by this invasion of like military dudes. And the military dudes aren't good. They're like pillaging the town. They're taking people's stuff. They're like doing things that make no sense in an actual quarantine, which is that like if there was this quarantine, you wouldn't go waking up people in the middle of the night and like sending, like they sort of attack them in the middle of the night. So
Yeah.
it's weird because one of the tensions is that you're almost like rooting for the townspeople against these military. You're not rooting
Sure.
for the military. They're not like,
Right.
we're following CDC orders. Like they're awful. And then and it's less visible. The virus leads to this sort of combination of aggression and sexualized behavior, but it's not, there's no body horror stuff, and there's no, you can't tell, you can't see it, there are no like red eyes and whatever.
So what happens when people get ill?
They get kind of angry and they get horny. And there is a whole subplot because you have the group of four, just like in 28 Days Later, 20 years later, or 30 years later, like this group that sort of escape and they're sort of hanging out in a house and trying to avoid it. And they don't know who's infected in this little tight group. And one of them is a father and daughter, and the father starts raping his daughter. So you have, because he's infected and no.
Okay.
So you have this behavior, but it's not, and like there's this one great scene, and I think you have an image of it, where the soldiers go into this house and the sort of, there's a little girl who's like creepily playing piano. And you're like, I guess this is normal. And then they go upstairs and grandma's knitting. You have grandma.
Yes, here's grandma.
So grandma's knitting and they're like, oh, it's a grandma knitting. And then she like stabs them with a needle. And it's fabulous, but just love it. But it's not visible on their skin. It's visible in their behavior, but it's not entirely clear what's their behavior because they're pissed at being invaded by all of these soldiers. And what is it that they have this virus? And at the end, you have the full like, and then the virus made it to another state. Like,
Right.
it is a virus,
Do
but
do
it's
they?
water transmitted.
Well, I mean, I feel like incestuous rape is a pretty good like we don't want that thing. But
Yeah,
do
yeah,
they
yeah.
do they die? Do they kill each other? Or they only kill the
They do.
government people? Okay.
They kill each other. They fight each other. They get super aggressive. Like, part of it is this aggressive behavior, but most of the movies actually just the guys in charge being like, should we bomb this town or not? Like, it's very Outbreak, weirdly.
Yeah.
It's very, but it
Well,
has this
that's
added element of like horror.
the whole plot in Outbreak hinges on whether the government is going to bomb the hell out of a town that's infected,
Exactly.
which is
Exactly.
odd given that they really do seem to have it pretty contained.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I think you
Just let them all die.
let
It's
them
all right.
die. Let the thing take its
Be
course. I
fine.
don't know. Like that's
Um,
essentially what they're doing 28 days later. So
but you have this sexualized behavior. You have this
hmm,
tension against the military and the man-madeness of it. All of this shit goes down because the government developed this virus and sent it on a plane en route. There was a plane crash and it ended up infecting the water supply. So again, you have this thing where this virus is created in a lab,
mm-hmm.
and and the military is like, sort of, the institution is evil.
Yeah.
So
So that brings me really to Viral, which is
oh
jumping ahead in
man.
time, but thematically there's some similarities that really stick out to me. So you didn't see it, did you?
No, because you told me it made Outbreak look like fucking Schindler's List, and I was like, that's okay.
it's it's pretty terrible. So uh, it's terrible in so many ways that I don't even know if we'll have time to get into. But here's the thing, okay? So Viral is about an infection. It's the movie is made in 2016. Here I have the poster that we can look at, and the poster is interesting because it's a sexy woman's big red lips with a
And there's the tongue, right?
yeah, there's a sort of parasite coming out of her mouth that could be a parasite or it could be a tongue. It's very suggestive and it has nothing to do with what the movie's about at all. It's not exploitive like that. It's not sexy at all. It's just a completely different movie from what that poster is promising you. Um, but it the it's actually kind of like two or three different movies. It can't decide what movie it wants to be. But the good first, I would say, half to three quarters of it is just about a town getting quarantined. So in that way, it is a lot like The Crazies and
Outbreak.
Outbreak, and even like Quarantine, that horror movie, the found footage one about the
The
newswoman
building.
in the building with the rage infected, rabid people. Um, they all sort of share this idea of disease is here, and the authorities, having no other recourse, are just going to shut you in and lock you up in there with the infected people, and they don't give a shit, and they're going to treat you like shit. Like that's a major theme. It's a recurring motif, and it is clearly a, a, a fear
So
that is
it's less.
associated with this situation.
So there are movies where the fear is the virus, and there are movies where the fear is, how will humans deal with a virus?
Right. And in Viral, which is a really interesting title because it is not about a virus, it is about a parasite, and the movie makes that exceptionally clear. I don't know why it's called Viral, Maya. I don't know why. And I'm like a couple minutes into it, I'm like, oh, it's a teenagers. I'm like, oh, Viral. They're gonna do a play on like viral
Right.
videos and internet.
Right.
No,
Right.
no.
No.
They didn't go, and the characters are on their phones like 80% of the movie. They're texting each other, but like they never use that and that pun and all the different directions you could go with that. In fact, I mean, the movie is so implausible in so many ways, which was I found
Is
my
it just trying to get all the thrills? Like, do you have like the
so
body horror thrill? Like, what are the
it's
thrills that
well,
it's
that's
like,
the thing. It's like a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a lot of nothing. So there's so much of this military here. I There's some great images I have. So let's be clear. The This is an image from the trailer. It says emergency alert system. The CDC has issued a worm flu warning. They
okay,
call it worm flu, though
okay.
there are no flu symptoms or anything similar associated with it. I
Is
don't
there a
know.
worm?
Yeah,
Is
there's
there a worm?
definitely a worm, but it's not a flu. Um, so right from the beginning of the movie, in the actual movie, it starts with uh, sort of a during the credits. There's a montage of like sound clips. I don't know if you can call
Uh-huh.
it a montage when it's in a collage of sound clips of like news reports about this worm flu, and they even have Obama's voice, presumably talking about the swine flu or who knows which epidemic at the time, but repurposed. So it's very like on the nose current events. This movie's 2016. Stuff had recently happened. It's very much like, that stuff in the news. What if it was real? So it's putting you there. Um, and the girl, okay, I'll just sort of summarize the plot as best I can. The main girl, she's in high school. Her BFF is the sassy black girl. The sassy black girl comes down with these crazy seizures,
Uh-huh.
and then shortly thereafter coughs blood onto this other kid who came around to help. And the next thing you know, the CDC and the government are at their school, and they're asking the protagonist, "Did you have you had any symptoms? Did you have any blood to blood or fluid contact with this person? I don't know what they were asking her, all these questions that seem very reasonable. And then they quarantine the whole town. The town is
Okay.
quarantined. The dad is
Okay.
stuck at the school. He's a teacher at the school. Oh, yes, he's also a parasitologist. So this drove me up the
Oh,
fucking wall.
oh,
The,
of course he is. Of
so
course he
so
is.
there's a
Yeah,
scene
sure. Sure.
before any of this happens, there's a whole scene where he's explaining to the kids like what a parasite is and how it works, and um, even tying it into, have you been watching the news? No? Well, you should be. And it's like, I know a lot of teenagers don't watch the news and don't follow this shit, but like, put two and two together, you dumbasses. They never put two and two together. It's so implausible. It's like when your friend is foaming at the mouth and then coughing blood and then dying, you're going to be like, let me see what I can find out about this worm flu. Like, you're going to look into it. But they don't.
Yeah.
They don't give a shit. Like, they don't. It's, ooh, I hate when movies do that. But that's besides the point. The larger point is that the dominant sort of imagery that you see in the first half of the movie is of the quarantine. They have helicopters fly overhead and drop off MREs, and that's all they have to eat because everything's shut down. And there's a military blockade. The two sisters try to drive out of town, and they can't because there's a military blockade. Just
That's
like
a whole thing.
it's a
That's a whole
whole thing.
thing.
And
That's a whole thing.
there's
Yeah, yeah,
even a
yeah.
guy who tries to ram the blockade with his truck,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
in the other
sure.
movies. The government or CDC or whoever, they put these spray paint symbols on everyone's garage doors to indicate how many infected are in the house and how many have been removed. And there's plenty of,
Ooh.
yeah, there's plenty.
Very, very Pesach.
Yeah, it is
Very.
very Pesach. It's very Passover. And it's also like there's a scene where she sees the neighbor. He has lit a flare, which is in the MRE package they've been given as a flare to let the authorities know if someone's infected. And they come and take away his wife. And it's very like, you know, she needs to be taken away. She's infected. She's very dangerous. But like it's that sort of Holocaust imagery. We saw an outbreak,
Oh, like
like
an
taking
outbreak.
people
Oh
away.
my God. Wait, wait, wait. So hold up. I'm
Hmm.
sorry. I forgot this one thing that was stunning about the crazies that I think is very important here.
Okay.
At one point, there are there's this church, and they sort of they go break up the church, all the military guys,
Mm-hmm.
to get them out, and the priest sets himself on fire,
Oh my goodness.
a la like Vietnam
That's
Buddhist
that's pointed.
protest. It's especially in the early
Yeah, yeah,
70s.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, he knows
So
what
it's like
he's
in the
evoking
middle
there.
of this thing where it's like, but you guys are all infected, but really the bad guy is the military?
Yeah, yeah. And that's definitely going on in this movie Viral that's not about a virus at all or anything viral. It's absolutely
And they
there.
want to do all the things, and it's all the stuff that like Second Amendment nuts are afraid of. Like, we have to take away, the first thing we have to do is take away their guns. And it's
Yeah.
like, I don't think that's the thing that they're gonna.
It's a weird fear because they're portraying the government, at least in Viral, but in a lot of these movies, as simultaneously entirely incompetent, but also oppressively overreaching. Like the infection in Viral is so ridiculously containable that that's what makes the movie laughable. You can't take it seriously. In the MRE package, they get these masks, like what are they, N95 mask
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
things, and so also, oh, well, I actually have a picture of this. At one point, so the parasite, which is a worm, uh, takes over their body and basically turns them into zombies. That's almost an afterthought in the movie. But there is this one scene where the dude breaks into their home. And it's interesting because this concept of invasion is very present. The knocking on the door, the sealed into your home, the home as the safe space, and it being penetrated is really a big presence in the movie. But then that's, oh yeah, not the picture I wanted to show. This is the picture I wanted to show. Is the zombie guy is right up in her face, and the characters that are not infected are all wearing their masks. And I'm like, put the mask on him. Like,
Right.
they've clearly established that there's one way to transmit it, and they cough blood on you.
Right.
There's a simple solution to this problem.
Right.
Like, it's so
Right.
easy. Just
Right.
just put the mask on him. Now, would I
Yeah.
have known that if I had watched this last year? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But like now I know what those fucking masks are for.
Right.
And I think I have a better sense. But like really the progression of this disease is so clear, and the stages so discrete and obvious. It's like so containable. It it's stupid. It's stupid, but nevertheless, the government has to quarantine the town and ultimately wind up bombing it. It's hardly a spoiler because in the first 5 minutes of the movie on the news, China is bombing a town that was infected. And you're like, that's foreshadowing. And yes, it is foreshadowing. They're going to wind up bombing her town. Oh, wait. I have a gif of that one as well. Because
So
wait, I just
so
have
wait
to
a second.
show
So
people this.
so
This
while
is so
while you
good.
show this,
Okay.
so we're hitting our time limit
Yes, we gotta wrap it
for
up.
real.
But the okay, go.
But I feel like it's almost like we're collecting, like we have to do an episode which is like, what have we learned?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because like we're collecting all of these themes, all of these kinds of things that we're seeing over and over and over and over again.
Yes.
It's like we're building the entire oh
What?
yeah,
Oh, you see it now?
yeah, I
So
see it now. There's a little bit of a delay on
the gif of them jumping
jumping into the
into the
pool.
pool with the explosion behind them. One of the first things I thought while watching this movie was this movie has seen a lot of other movies.
Yes.
Most of the things in it are familiar, and some of it was like horror movie, like the neighborhood they live in it's a suburban planned community right out of a sort of early 80s Spielberg. It made me think of Poltergeist, and I was like, okay, I guess I see where you're going with that. But it's all very just like bits and pieces borrowed from other movies that don't add up. But yes, as you were saying, there are these threads and through lines and recurring tropes and motifs that just really reveal a lot about what is
Okay.
what are the fears around disease that
So
manifest
so
in horror movies.
so I'm gonna just make a list because I want to add this to like the what have we learned.
Okay.
There's the whole rape thing. There's the military control thing. There's this weird thing where it's like you are not you. And that is in two levels. They're like the you are dead, you are a zombie. And then there's like gross things are happening
Bodily.
in your
Yeah,
body.
your body is not familiar to you. It is not.
Sex is bad.
Yes.
Taboos are crossed as part of infection.
Yes.
And that's many taboos. There's sexual taboos. There's just like basic social taboos.
Yes. And institutions fail.
Yes.
Government, military, social, it all kind of collapses. So
and when it collapses, it's revelatory of what humans are. And I think that that's what's really interesting about this moment is that when we're in this moment of our current COVID crisis, you have a couple of, you have the small minority of people who are like, rah, but for the most part, people are sort of like doing their job. They're staying home if they can. They're like
ramming any barricades with their cars.
They're not ramming barricades with the cars. They're not coming in like there's this weird thing that happened in like rich neighborhoods and rich streets where they immediately boarded up all their fancy stores because they were so sure that people were gonna like loot their stores. And it's like, no, that's really not happening. But there needs to be this fear that what humans are these rapacious,
right, that
animalistic.
That the real scary thing is the people, is other people. But I have an umbrella for all of that. My umbrella for all of that is violation. The fear of being violated, having your bodily integrity violated, your bodily autonomy violated, your privacy, your very identity violated, having your rights and freedoms violated, and your trust in other people. It all falls under the umbrella of violation. That disease is a form of violation. There.
Wow.
There we go. Okay.
Wow.
We should wrap up, but I want to respond to all these great chat comments
we're getting. Such good ones. They're so good.
So, Raven Vance has pointed out that The Walking Dead is really interesting. We've been sticking to movies, but The Walking Dead is interesting in that aspect because everyone is already infected. So what people really have to fear is each other. Yeah, that goes to what we were just saying, right? That is really the overriding theme of Walking Dead, right? In the end, the hell is other people. The thing you really have to fear is other people.
Yes.
Well said. The snowboard staff mentions that, I'll just read it. I thought I saw that Danny Boyle had made 2 endings. The original was much darker, but not commercially viable, so they made him change it. I hadn't read that. I hadn't heard that. I would love to see that original ending.
Yeah, right.
Raven Vance also mentioned the movie Cabin Fever, which was not one that we watched. It's also relatively early one as these movies go, as being the early 2000s, I think. But it's from 2002, the same time as 28 Days Later. It's about an infection that, like a flesh-eating virus. So it's a lot of body horror, like gross out body horror kind of stuff. I haven't actually seen it. I've only seen like clips from it, but that would have been a good one to fit into this whole conversation. There's a lot to talk about. Thank you all.
There is so much to talk about. And we love that you guys are watching. And I think part 3, we're going to get post-apocalyptic. And I think we're going to what have we learned? Wrap it all up.
Exactly.
But for now, guys, I don't know if you've noticed how many times I've refilled my glass. But it's because it's mostly ice anyway. You know,
right?
it's sad.
coconut cream. Coconut cream.
It's just coconut
That's, I
milk and
guess,
also
it's not
rum.
coconut milk though. You said it was coconut cream.
No, I said I didn't have coconut cream, but I've learned
Oh,
that I'm supposed to have coconut cream.
okay.
Oh,
Gotcha.
we got to thank you for adding the images. Oh, thank
Oh,
you, Dean.
I
Oh,
it
we
took me a long
that
time
was
to set that all up. So
it's
thank
really
you for
good that you said
appreciating
thank
it.
you. Now Rebecca will do the work again. That's really good. So thank you guys so much for listening. We
Yeah,
love knowing that you're with us right now. That actually is really super thrilling when
absolutely.
we're recording. Email us, saucepodcast@gmail.com, tweet and Instagram us at saucepodcast. Rate us on whatever podcast app you use. If anybody knows anybody who can help me with some Plague Archives podcast, I can do it by myself, but I'd really not
You'd love some
prefer
help. What kind
to.
of help do you need, really quickly?
If anybody if anybody knows any producers, somebody who's willing to do some work for cheap right now, just like extra hands, I will take them. Interns, really smart college students, you want to work on a new kind of project and you're willing to do it for free, I will take the help. So email me at mygrants@gmail.com or find me at mygrants anywhere you're looking for migrants.
And you can reach out to me. I am Gynostar on all the various platforms. And definitely visit patreon.com/saucepodcast. You can join there and get access to bonus material that exists already and more that we're going to add. You can also join the conversation on our Discord. And I really,
Ma'am.
really want to hear what people think about horror movies. Well, all movies about disease, but this week we're talking about horror and what you think it reveals about what scares people when it comes to these very real issues.
I also owe people on Discord some TikTok dance challenges, and I will get there. I will get there.
Okay,
Now, the one thing I
right.
will say,
We've
there's a
gone there.
line.
Okay.
I gotta share one of the best Beyonce lines of all time in the Savage remix. She talks about how she got her ass from Tina. And she says, if you don't jump when putting jeans on, baby, you don't feel my pain. That is a great line. That is a great line. And clearly your ass is too skinny for you to understand that line.
It took me a minute, but no one has ever accused my ass of being skinny. I carry it all back there. But
anyway,
it did take me a second there.
I owe you guys a TikTok and I will get it to you. But thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Thank you all. Adios, amoebas.
Tell me when it's off.